So hello and welcome to the Junior Developer Link podcast. I'm Chris. I am one of the founders of the Developer Link, which is a software development recruitment company, and also a founder and mentor at the Junior Developer Link, which we started pretty much the exact same time we started the business, coming up to 3 years ago now. And when we started the business, we realized that we didn't have a lot for junior developers, so we made essentially this junior community to support people and give them access to our network of both sort of senior engineering leaders and talent leaders and people that want to inspire the kind of next generation of software engineering talent. And like through that, we did a load of events, and we've now switched to this podcast and getting some really good traction. And this time we're going through career progression with Yusuf. And Yusuf, I met you through LinkedIn a couple of years ago, and you actually, I looked earlier, you actually did our first ever event. So good to have you back. Like, look, feels like a very long time since we've done something together. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. I didn't realize I did the first ever event with you guys actually. I thought I was one of the few that had already done one before, so interesting to know.
I
Yeah, not
might
too
have
bad,
told you
thanks.
that we'd done loads, but we hadn't. It was a lie. Like, it was the
I'm
first ever
sure
one.
I'm sure you did tell me, I've just forgotten 'cause it's been 2 years now. I was just thinking before. It was 2 years ago I did that talk with Developer Link. Uh yeah, doing good, cracking on, still a software engineer, so that's always a good sign. So yeah.
For sure. So give me a little bit about your background then. So you've been working in the industry for how long now? Is it 2 years pretty much bang on or?
I think it's like 2.5 years. So I did about 6 months on a part-time basis. That took me up to 2 years ago. And then since then I've been full-time for 2 years. So yeah, 2.5 years like in total. So yeah.
Nice. And obviously, we'll go into this a little bit more, but you've kind of progressed pretty well in those couple of years. And we're going to be talking about career progression today. I guess it's not one of your typical things for an entry level developer because a lot of them struggling to get the first job, right? But I guess why have you chosen career progression, and why do you think that's important for juniors to be thinking about?
Yeah, so I guess when you look online out there, there's a lot of content on like getting that first job and becoming a junior and how to be good at a junior level role. But then I feel like the content sort of drops off after that point. So people become mid-level, people become senior. But I feel like there's no content from these sort of mid to senior people who are talking about what that journey between each level looked like and how it feels to go from the entry level to sort of mid-level. And I think, once you become a junior, you realize that mid-level sort of level isn't too far away from where you are now. So I think if I was to go back and do something different, is I'd probably think about what that mid-level role would look like a bit sooner. So hopefully a podcast like this and other blogs and stuff out there would help juniors in that position.
Is and I guess like what defines a mid-level developer then? Like what's the like I guess for someone like myself and I guess without having too much experience it just seems like it's a number of years experience. Like I guess there's some degree to that, right? But like what would you say are like the actual defining points of going from like junior to mid-level?
Yeah, it's a really good question that. I guess a big part of it comes down to like how much external support you need when it comes to like picking up any engineering tickets or being able to kind of give your thoughts and opinions on something technical. So when you're at the very entry level, whether it's apprentice or associate slash junior, whatever level, you're probably at a point where you need a bit more sort of guidance when it comes to kind of approaching a ticket, completing a technical task, even just technical knowledge and information. You might need to sort of lean on other people for that. But then as you do that more and more, you begin to get the sort of independence of being able to think for yourself and break down problems yourself. So that's not to say that you do everything by yourself and that you never need support because that's just not the case. No matter what seniority level you're at, you're always going to need
I was
help.
gonna say I don't think that's ever the case, is it?
No, literally no. And even mid-level, that's not senior. So there's levels to go once you're mid as well. I think it's just more about being able to kind of get a rough idea of how to do like problem solving with a particular technical problem, approach it the way you see fit, but like having the confidence to be able to do that in the first place. I think when you first join the industry, it's hard to determine whether you can or can't do something. But then as you gain more experience, you could look at a problem at a high level and think, oh, actually, I've got some of the skills to do this, or got some of the pieces, and I can then lean on other people for like the other pieces. So it's kind of just having some rough idea of how to do things, but not quite everything. So you're not expected to be like perfect. But again, I don't think you're expected to ever be perfect in in the entire ladder. So at a high level, I think that's kind of what determines what a mid level is versus like someone more junior.
Is there an element of it which is like, I guess, learning shortcuts and more efficient ways to do things, and also knowing kind of like what to delegate, what to kind of work on yourself and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to like just being given something and having to work out the best way to do it and doing it all yourself. Does that come into it a bit as well?
I think so, yeah, because I think a part of it as well comes down to like once you've done a few things multiple times, you'll be able to spot like patterns and like the way certain things are done. Because there's a lot of things that you do that are quite arbitrary and common across like different sort of platforms. So you kind of look at something and think, oh, actually, I've seen this sort of problem before. I think I know how to approach it. But then obviously, when you're a junior, you've not seen any sort of technical problems before, so you're hitting those sort of blocks for the first time. But then once you overcome them, you'll probably see them again and again in some different forms, but in a way that you can recognize. And again, I think that's what kind of helps you be a bit more of a mid-engineer because you can then give your thoughts and opinions on a problem that you've solved in the past and help it feed into a problem that you're solving in the present time. So stuff like that can really help.
Yeah, for sure. I guess when you talk about your own progression, like there's obviously progression in terms of like title, there's a progression in terms of like your ability level, your responsibility level. Like, I guess it's some of all of that, but like what's kind of most important to yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think one thing that I want to hone in on is the fact that as much as it is about your ability to write code and like the technical side, the soft skills are really, really important as well. And I think they can be sort of undermined initially for a junior engineer because you're so focused on learning all the hot frameworks and technologies and stuff, and that's great. So there's, keep doing that. But then you get to a point where it's like you've got these technologies under your belt, you can do them, but then there's other things that makes up an engineer. So you're not ever just going to be expected to sit and write code all day. Like there's more elements to it which involves like the soft skills. So being able to present, being able to communicate your thoughts, whether that's like through a video call or whether that's through Slack, like messaging, taking notes, asking the right questions, potentially taking lead on things, like all these other things come into play. And I think a big part for me there is like, particularly for people that are like career switching maybe. So maybe you've been in other industries for years and you're only just coming into software engineering now. Always bring in like all your experiences from everywhere else because that's what makes you individually like quite well-rounded versus someone that may not have those experiences. So like, for example, when I was at university, some people had just been at the university studying computer science and hadn't done anything else. So they didn't have like a part-time retail job. They weren't doing anything else to kind of broaden their skills. So not that they weren't great, but it's just like they weren't as well rounded as the people who had a bit more of a background in doing
Yeah.
other things. So that's like one point I kind of really want to hone on to today's podcast. So yeah.
I guess like from like a coding perspective, like you can go away and you can learn something, and there's courses and like all of that kind of stuff. For sort of soft skills, like if there's a particular area that people need to improve on, so say for example it is like taking the lead on something or delivering your ideas, and whether that be like a presentation or even just kind of like pushing back on stuff, is there a way outside of just being like, screw it, today's the day, like I'm just gonna take the lead on something and see what happens, and having to just do something for the first time, is there a way that you can go away and learn the softer skills like kind of offline, or does it all have to be kind of like on the job sort of learning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me personally, like what helped me was like the stuff that I do sort of outside of work. So things like with, I don't know, I guess doing talks and podcasts like this and like voicing my thoughts and opinions on the internet, like little things like that, without me realizing has helped sort of helped me like today because it means that I'm quite good at communicating like in a written format and even like on calls and stuff, just because I've been doing it already. But then also when I'm in work, the best way to kind of tackle it is kind of just identifying those opportunities and hopefully your manager will be supportive in that as well. So you can say, look, I want to try and stretch my soft skills. I want to take lead on things. I want to be a bit more vocal. And they should, like, as your manager, support you and help you identify those things that you can do. So like in my company, for instance, at Moonpig, we have weekly one-to-ones with our manager. The main thing that we talk about is like, the goals that we've set for the year. And, one of them might have been to take more lead on things or to be more vocal, right? And my manager would constantly kind of keep an eye on like opportunities that I could use to further develop that. And then stuff like that would then feed into like getting promoted because that's like one of the criteria to get promoted, like being able to take lead on things, communication, teamwork, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's a couple of avenues that you can take with that sort of stuff.
Sure. But I guess from what you're saying, I guess one of the biggest things is like actually just being able to communicate your ideas and your thought process effectively, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be the biggest thing. And like you said, actually things like you've done in terms of like documenting your sort of journey and getting involved in talks about how you got into tech and I guess even just going to sort of meetups and things like that and talking to people like will really take a lot of that pressure out of it because it's not a oh if I mess up in this presentation like I might get fired like it's
Yeah.
kind of like I'm just talking to people about what I've done and my
Mhm.
ideas and my experiences and I guess that can translate back in right so it's a really good idea and like you're from when I met you obviously you're quite far along your kind of journey of documenting like your journey in coding. I guess talk to me about how you got into that because I looked at your Instagram, your followers are crazy big, and obviously you're still kind of going through that because it started as something just to get you into coding in the first place, right? Because obviously we spoke about this a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so first I started on Instagram, and from a young age I've always had an interest in like social media and like kind of marketing. So when I was in first year at uni, I want to say 2018, I thought I'd make like a coding blog just to document my journey. And the main reason I did it was just to connect with other computer science students that are across the world and just see if we can, I don't know, help each other, give each other advice and stuff. And I also like sort of content creation, so that was my mini way of doing it. So just taking pictures of like my work and posting it and writing a caption. But as simple as that sounds, the whole content curation process of like writing a caption that people could actually read, um, again, writing down my thoughts and opinions on like things I was working on, that started to really help me like write things down from my brain. And as simple as it sounds, it can be harder than you think. So constantly having
Yeah,
to like kick my brain into gear to write down what I've been working on and learning has helped me today with my sort of written communication skills. So started on Instagram, then moved on to LinkedIn a couple of years later because I heard that that was a good platform to be on. Had no idea what to do, so I kind of just reposted what I did on Instagram on there, and it got good traction eventually. Like the first few posts, like no one really saw or cared, but as you start to connect with people and interact with people, people seem to take a bit of an interest into like what you're doing as an individual. So it's kind of like how it started at a high level.
yeah. I guess it's kind of like is it double-edged sword where you're kind of let's say for example you're learning something all day and then your bit of content that you're going to write is like a summarization of what you've learned. One, you're kind of like cementing that in your mind of like this is what I did, and you're almost kind of like giving yourself cliff notes as to what you've done and kind of recapping on it. But then also, like you said, you're kind of creating it into a way that could be for anyone because like it could be anyone of any level that's reading your content and that kind of stuff, particularly if you're doing it for other juniors. It has to be quite a simplified level and almost in kind of layman's terms to be able to post it, right? So that must be a really good way to get to a point where you really know your stuff. If you can do something complicated and then explain it simply in like quite a short format, because I guess particularly within a lot of organizations you're dealing with non-technical people as well as obviously more technical people, so just being able to you might have been working on something for like a week and then someone will be like, what were you working on? And to be able to like actually summarize something really complicated that you've been working on in a very short period, like that must be quite a skill to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on a good point there with basically being able to adapt your language for different audiences. And I'm kind of quoting like Moonpig's growth framework because one of the sort of requirements to kind of be more of a mid-level engineer is being able to adapt sort of what you're saying for different audiences. So like if you're in a room full of not just engineers, but product designers, product managers, the people that aren't as technical, you need to be able to distill the stuff that you're doing from a coding world and kind of just take it out and say, right, what are the bits of information that they don't need to know about? Because there's loads of technical things no one else is really going to care about. They just want to know how something works at a high level and what that means for the customer.
Yeah.
And being able to do that is a skill that takes time to build up because it is very easy to start blabbing on about the engineering side because that's what your head's in all day. But you need to also be able to like look at the problem you're solving, take a step back and say, right, what is the problem we're actually solving? How have we done it at a high level that others would actually care about? And yeah, it takes time to do that for sure.
Nice. And we were talking about like obviously the soft skills of like a mid-level engineer. Um, I guess like I don't want to put you on the spot, but where would you say that you're at right now, both in terms of like I guess your actual like career level and as well as like I guess mentally, do you feel like you're sort of there?
Yeah, I'd say from a career perspective, I'm like on my way to mid-engineer, like I'm exhibiting some traits of it already as I've seen at Moonpig. So from a technical perspective, I think I'm like kind of there, but obviously lots to learn and grow within the mid-level engineer space as well. Mentally, though, I still feel like I'm that brand new junior that joined the industry 2 years ago. I still feel like I'm a fresh graduate from university, even though I'm not. It's been, 2.5 years. I'm not there anymore. Um, so at the moment, I'm dealing with the imposter syndrome of like the fact that I am progressing, it's being acknowledged around me. I'm getting good feedback about the work I'm doing, but for some reason, it's not really registering in my own head. And I think a lot of it comes down to how I see myself rather than how others see me. So if anyone's listening that has that same problem, like you're not alone.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think like it's definitely something that like we've spoken about it in the past. It's something that I have for sure. But is it for you? Is it a case of you're continuing to do more and more complex things, kind of like day by day, week by week? So you're just kind of like treading water, like from like an ability perspective, or is it just a case of you feel like you've not transitioned into like embodying a full-time software engineer still at this point?
No, so I definitely think I'm doing like all the right things to embody like a software engineer, like even at the mid level. Like I can definitely acknowledge times where I've been less of the associate slash junior in the room, like taking lead on things, voicing my thoughts and opinions of being able to like help diagnose a problem with my own sort of past experiences. So it's like I'm doing the right things, but I think part of it comes down to knowing the fact that I don't know everything, but no one ever really knows everything. So it's kind of like
Yeah,
managing my own expectations of myself because if I was talking to somebody else, my expectations for them wouldn't be as high as they are for myself. But I think a lot of people like myself who are try to achieve quite highly, try to kind of be quote unquote perfect, right? You end up giving your own self like a lot of slack for not doing certain things that you would never give to somebody else. So I think a lot of it is a mental battle, to be honest.
yeah, for sure. Have you ever read the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck?
I have read parts of that actually. I think I
I
nearly finished it, but honestly, it did help me a lot.
I'm really like rereading it at the moment, and it's a good refresh. Like that, you literally can only care about so many things at like kind
Yeah.
of one point in time, and people that care about like really tiny things don't have anything important kind of going on. But
Yeah.
everyone cares about something, but it's just making sure that you take the time to care about stuff that is important. And I think caring about your career and things like that and wanting to be like very very good at your job, I think is a very very important thing. But I think a lot of it comes down to as well, like you said, taking on things that you're not comfortable with and striving to be better. Like you could probably still be sat in a junior role right now, like if you wanted to, and have just coasted for another 2 years and really really got comfortable. But it's probably not in your nature, right? You want to be better, but unfortunately, it is uncomfortable to put yourself out of your comfort zone and do things that you're not used to. And like I have quite bad anxiety myself, and if I put myself in a situation that I've not been in before, then I find it quite tough. But I'm starting to get to the point now where I realize that if I don't put myself in that situation, I'll just avoid it. Whereas once you put yourself in the situation, you realize it's not that bad, the next time will be even less bad, and then you're kind of fine with it, right? But if you want to be better at stuff, that you almost need to get to the point where you have to put yourself in these uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, 100% right. And yeah, I've had loads of experiences like that myself in my career. In my first job at Moonpig, like before you go off and do something that's get out of your comfort zone, you are going to get that anxiety. If you have anxiety as like a condition as well, it's 10 times worse because regular people get that bit of anxiety for something difficult, but then bring in the people that have like medically diagnosed anxiety, it's like 10 times worse. So you're going to feel it. Obviously, everyone's got their own coping mechanisms, whether it's therapy, medication, whatever it is that helps you lean on those and just go for it because at the end of the day, if you mess up, right, this is something which someone said to me ages ago, like, we're not doctors, like no one's gonna die, like we're writing code, like it's not that deep on a level. It's actually not that deep. In your head it's more deep than it actually is. But it's probably because you're caring about how you look to everyone more than the impact of something. And if
Yeah.
something goes terribly tits up, like, do you know what? There's ways to solve it. Like it's we're in an industry where things can be reversed and things can be fixed quite quickly. So from that perspective, it's never that big of an issue. But I think because we care about how we look to other people, that can really start to make you feel like you can't make a single mistake. But that's just unrealistic. So yeah,
Yeah, and I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves, right? And it probably, the more you're striving to go up that career ladder, I guess the more you would, I guess, seem to want to not make mistakes. Whereas as a junior, like I guess you come in and you're kind of expected to. But I guess if you want to be perceived as not a
yeah,
junior, probably each time you could make a mistake might make people think, particularly with the imposter syndrome added, might make people think, oh, if I do this wrong, they're going to think that I'm still a junior, where I'm not a junior anymore. Like, and it almost kind of like just compounds to that, right? But I think I read something earlier that it almost the higher you get up, you feel like you know more and more and more. Whereas like when you get to the top of it, you realize that you still actually don't know that much. Then that's
yeah.
that's when you've kind of peaked, is when you're like, oh, so I actually compared to what I could know, I know relatively little, as opposed to like amassing information up until that point.
Yeah, that's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, I think, if anyone wants to Google it. It's like a graph that shows you the points that Chris just mentioned. Um, yeah, there's another point I wanted to mention, I've completely forgotten now. Oh, I think, yeah, it's basically, it's okay to be junior. Like, don't feel like you need to get out of that box so quickly because I think one kind of mistake I've made in the past is I'd struggled to reach out for help because I didn't want people to see me as a junior, even though I literally was. Like, this was my first job in the industry, so over a year ago now. I did ask for help and I got good at it, but there's a part of me saying, oh, if you ask for help, people are gonna think you're dumb and you're not gonna, you're gonna get fired. Like, no, that's not the case. Like, you've been hired for a reason. You've got the competencies to do the job. I think just have that confidence in yourself that, if you're struggling, reaching out for help and asking is actually so much better than sitting on one problem for like a long time. Because if you think about it from a business perspective, if you're spending ages on one little problem because you're worried about what people think, the wider problem is you're spending ages on one problem that's costing money per hour that you could have actually solved that problem within that time with someone if you just reached out for help. So that's why, like, for junior roles, they try to look out for people who are good at being proactive and asking the right questions. And you're not going to be perfect at it from the beginning, but if you just try and reach out as and when you get stuck, that's fine. That, people actually appreciate that you are reaching out because sometimes people think, oh, some juniors are going to take a problem, they're not going to reach out for help, and that's when problems actually happen. So always reach out for help is my tip and advice there.
Yeah, for sure. We actually spoke about that on the last one we did with David, about that's one of the top things that people are looking for from a junior developer, is the ability to be proactive.
Yeah,
And at any level as a recruiter, particularly more now for, I guess, remote roles where people can't just turn around and like ask people like, oh, how do I deal with this? People really want to see that perfect level of, not someone that's going to ask for help like every second of every day with every problem, but it's the perfect storm of, well, not perfect storm, but perfect like mix between, we'll go away, we'll try it, and then we'll come back and be like, this is what I've tried, I'm stuck, can you help? And that's at every level. But I guess the pressure's probably higher from a junior, right? Because they won't have had the experience to know when they should ask, or how hard they should try, or anything like that. But I think it is that
yeah.
mix of going away, trying something, coming back and being like, I've tried this, like what do I do next? I think it is a big thing. And like if there are people that are sat there, like you said, not asking for help, like the last thing people want is people, they said, spending a week on one problem and going down a rabbit hole. Whereas if they'd asked one question, they might be put in a different direction and be absolutely fine.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah. Spot on there.
people have even started to put them into like technical tests and stuff like that now. Like they'll literally misspell something in a technical test, or like they'll add a like, for any questions, please reach out to like this email address. And a lot of the
Hmm.
time that is part of the test, is that
Ah,
they want people to reach out to the email address and be like, just to confirm, like this doesn't make sense, could you clarify? Like, and
yeah.
that's like huge green flag if they actually use the email address. Whereas people seem to instant thought, if they see like an email address, be like, I shouldn't reach out to that because that's going to make me look stupid. Like if I can't understand it. But a lot of the time, people would prefer that you clarify the instructions and like know what they're doing. I have
Yeah.
multiple clients where they're like, they see that as a huge positive as opposed to it being a negative thing. So if they people are using that during an interview process, like the first thing a manager's gonna want you to do is ask them for help, right?
Precisely, and even that sort of ability to be able to break down a problem and identify things that don't quite make sense, that's a skill that you need as you go up the ladder. So even like mid-level, being able to look at a problem and say, right, okay, this makes sense, but this doesn't quite make sense. Even if everything's technically sound, so there's no spelling errors or anything, but you as an engineer aren't understanding certain things, being able to identify what that thing is and be able to communicate that back to whoever you need to is itself a skill, and that kind of bridges from when you're a junior trying to ask for help. Like that's going to stay with you regardless of how much you learn. So definitely one to keep in mind as you start to progress.
I guess a little bit of a different question for me, if you don't mind. When you're working internally at, like, say for example, the last couple of places that you've worked, like do you have multiple different ways of communicating with your team? Like are you using like Slack and email and phone call and Teams and like, all of that kind of stuff like at the same time? And have you found a way that you feel most comfortable like communicating your ideas to the rest of your team, or do you have to do it across all different platforms?
Yeah, it's a good question. A big part of this comes down to how the company works. So in my first company, like it was quite an individual sort of like you worked on an individual basis. So a lot of my asking for help was done via Slack, so writing messages out and then sending it to like our engineering channel where all the engineers were in. But then since moving to Moonpig, the way of working is quite different. So the way that we pick up tickets is not on an individual basis, but as a pair or as a whole team. And that way you're constantly on a call with someone and you're writing the code together. So what that means is if you've got any thoughts or problems or something, you just voice it out. Like you blurt it out like, oh, this variable doesn't make sense. What's going on? Like you just, it's a bit of a casual back and forth when you're trying to solve the problem. As daunting as pairing.
For sure, because like a lot of companies are using that in their interview process now as well, and I think that can be quite daunting to some people to be thrown into a pair programming interview. And I think people a lot of the time will be worse when someone's just all of a sudden watching them write code, like they just freeze and forget everything that they possibly know. Like, do you have any, if it was during an interview, do you have any, like, I guess like tips to, I guess, like, calm themselves, or like what, like if they're supposed to be talking, like should they be talking out loud about like as they go, like what would you recommend for someone that's not done pair programming? Yeah, I think particularly for a junior level, right? They're kind of assessing to a degree where someone is technically, but it's, can we work with this person? Like, can this person collaborate with others? Can I put them in to an environment where I pair them with a senior and like they're going to be like good for that person to work with? Like, it might even be that they have a particular senior person in mind, or it might be the senior you're going to work with that's doing the pair programming with you, and it might just be, can these guys work together? Like, is this going to work as an actual pairing, or just within our organization, do they fit the way that people think and things like that? So, I think that's really really good advice. I guess for yourself, like obviously you've got to the point where you're kind of like embodying that mid level and kind of there now. Do you have a thought in mind as to where you want to like end up? Like, because I don't know what because there's obviously so many different routes that you can go, right? Individual contributor, like management being like the main two. But do you have a thought, and do you know from like fairly early on like where you want to end up at, or are you kind of just seeing where things take you? And I guess, do you have any other tips for people that are in junior roles right now that are looking to progress and want to progress? Sure, and I'll share that. I'll share that afterwards with the link to the pod as well. So thanks for that. I looked over that earlier. I didn't know that that was a thing. So that's really useful. And then I guess on top of that, there's some people move companies to kind of get promotions, and some people kind of work on them internally. I guess if you've got a framework and there's things to work towards, I guess it can seem a little bit easier to be able to like kind of work towards these things because they're written down. If you're in a company that doesn't, like, is it easier to just move company to get a promotion? Or like should you stay where you are and kind of like figure out internally what's next for you? Like what's the kind of better route if any out of the two? I guess what if someone feels like they're doing everything like on the framework to go to the next level, but like the company doesn't see it? I'm assuming that would be a straight move, right? Or would you check more with like peers to check that you are doing those things and you don't just think you're doing those things? For sure. And I guess any sort of final bits of advice for progression for I guess anyone really from your own experiences. It's funny, isn't it? Because I guess ultimately a lot of it boils down to, like you said, being worried about other people's opinions and all of that kind of stuff, and like you not wanting to mess up and what are other people going to think. But then when someone tells you good things about yourself, you're like, I was worried about your opinion if it was bad. But when you give me a good opinion, like, I don't believe you. Yeah. Very strange, very strange. But ultimately, I think, like we said earlier, we're not psychologists, so we can't go into that in too much detail. But no, I think that's really good advice. I think like everyone has that to a degree. I think that imposter syndrome, and I think going from one, getting your first job, having never done it before, and going from junior to like mid are probably two of the biggest ones, right? Like, of really getting imposter syndrome, of shedding that junior title, and also just getting your first job as a whole. When some people might have been a teacher 12 weeks ago, gone to a boot camp, and then all of a sudden they're like about to start day one as a junior developer. Like there must be a lot in there of like, I don't know what I'm doing and I shouldn't be here. So I think to know that a lot of people have that, including yourself, when you've gone to that level, I think is a very reassuring thing. But I think it's ultimately because yourself and a lot of other people push themselves out of their comfort zone, and the same with a lot of bootcamp grads. Like they've pushed themselves out of their comfort zone to completely drop out of a career and do it in something new. So it's natural that there's going to have an element of that, right? Well, thanks so much for coming on, Yusuf. If people have got any questions for you or want to kind of connect with you online, like where's the best place to find you? Nice. Well, thank you so much, man. Really, really good to catch up with you. And for yeah, anyone that is listening, if you've got any follow-up questions for myself, it's Chris at the developerlink.io. And we've got plenty more episodes in the works. I've got one on Friday. I've got couple more next week, and we've probably got 10 to 15 more people in the works that we're lining up. And if anyone's got any suggestions on topics or questions from previous podcasts, it's podcast at the developerlink.io, and we'll make sure we get them all answered. Thanks again, Yusuf. Really appreciate it, and we'll see everyone else next time.